I first saw wing walking when I was about 6 years old, and it reached out and grabbed my heart, and I just knew that being a wing walker was always what I wanted to do, and it's my passion.
A 4-year-old boy watching the Red Arrows, he can be inspired by what he sees in our display, and that is really what we're getting from being at an airshow.
I'm a full-time display pilot since 35 years. I have flown 2,900 displays in 38 countries, but I still love that.
I obviously love airshows. I've been going to airshows since I was 1 year old, and I grew up in Biggin Hill in Kent, where there was a big airshow every year, which is what led me to want to join the Red Arrows. And I've always enjoyed going to an airshow. I'm very fortunate now that my job takes me to airshows throughout the summer, and I do enjoy watching all of the performances. I particularly enjoy helicopter displays, actually. Obviously, the jet formation teams are brilliant as well, and of course I'm very biased in saying that from the Red Arrows, but I do enjoy watching all of the formation teams. What I do like is mixed formations, so we've been very fortunate over the last number of years to fly in formation with aircraft like the Vulcan bomber. We also flew in Sanicole in 2015 with other formations, other teams. So it's a great experience, and something I really enjoy at airshows, making something different.
I'm an airshow organizer sometimes. The idea is to entertain the spectators, so we have to have different type of acts. Of course, you need jets, noise, national teams if possible, with smoke, with a lot of things. But also you have to tell a story to the spectators, to the audience. So you need to have a properly balanced program with aerobatics, with vintage aircraft, and be able to teach, to entertain, to talk to the people about aviation in a wide range of activities.
Well, I think the best shows are the ones that have the most balance and the most diversity. If you have 5 planes that look almost identical, the general public that comes out to see the events are less excited about that. The shows that have a glider and a jet and a prop plane and a wing walker, parachutists and that sort of thing are typically the ones that are most well received by the public.
My aim for participating in an airshow is, for me personally, is to engage with the younger children, because as for myself, I remember when I was 6 years old, looking up at those aircraft, it's inspiring. And if I can inspire little girls to become wing walkers or little boys to become pilots in the future, that's something really special for me.
I never had an aim really. I was always been interested. I was very lucky with collecting these aircraft, and also very lucky to find this original Blériot that I've been able to operate now since 1991. So the aim is that, well, it's fun. It pays the rent.
We want to promote aviation specifically, but oftentimes in a community they want to bring attention to their local airport. In some cases, people who live in a community may not even know that the airport's there, and of course, for a weekend each year, the airport becomes the focus of the community when there's an airshow there.
Well, the airshow, you need the airshow to present the aircraft. You know, I fly the aircraft at home, but I cannot invite 20, 30, 40 or 5,000 people, to my place. So the only place you can show an aircraft like this, that's at an airshow. And thanks to the airshow, they help me, and hopefully I help them. And also, we help the people to see them.
What participating in an airshow does is it gives you a mission, it gives you a purpose for flying your aircraft, and it gives you the opportunity to demonstrate and show what may be a unique or a very special aircraft to the public and to the visitors to the airshow.
De Koninklijke Luchtmacht Historische Vlucht is in eerste instantie een stichting die ervoor is om historische vliegtuigen in de lucht te houden. En dat doen we met heel veel mensen, met heel veel inzet. En daarvoor hebben we uiteraard middelen nodig. En airshows is een van de mogelijkheden om voor ons middelen, dus geld, binnen te krijgen om onze historische vliegtuigen, ons cultureel erfgoed in de lucht te houden.
Defence engagement, so we operate with our other nations within NATO, which is why we operate in Europe. We with the French and the Spanish and the Dutch and the Belgians. That's one of our roles, is defence engagement. We're representing the excellence of the Royal Air Force. Now that's why we go to an airshow. We're flying in front of 50,000 people, we're engaging on the ground in front of these people, and it's all about demonstrating the excellence of the Royal Air Force. We also help recruit for the military, so we are a recruiting tool for the military. It's not so much of a key role anymore because the recruiting drive has slowed down somewhat over the last decade or so, but it's still a very much something that just embedded in what we do day to day. But our key role, and I really do say this, is inspiration of the next generations.
The biggest challenge is that a lot of air shows today, or of course, they don't really understand how you have to operate an aircraft from 1910. In the old days, you flew them early in the morning, in the evening, because they are very sensible for winds. You cannot take a crosswind, so in the old days they had aerodromes around field. You can always land and take off into the wind. Today you maybe have a narrow runway, you have a crosswind, you have a forest very close by, so you have a rotor, and this makes it dangerous for this kind of aircraft. And always, you have to fly around between 12 and 2 o'clock during the day, and that's the worst time of the day. You have the thermal air, you have the sun, you have the wind. Yep. So these are the problems normally, that air shows don't really understand that to operate safely you cannot really follow the modern rules, because the modern rules will make it dangerous.
There are the normal challenges around safety. Making sure that you're able to have sufficient time to be able to demonstrate the aeroplane. And the way that we think about it is to be able to really pose the aircraft for photographs and for the spectators to see the aeroplane in different sort of attitudes and guises, so that they get a really good impression about the aeroplane, but always keeping safety in mind.
Something that's very noticeable when you take the aircraft out of the UK, where it's quite a temperate environment, it's quite cold, generally the aeroplane performs very well, and we're at sea level, there's nothing very high in the UK. You then go to somewhere like Jordan, for example, where you might be displaying at 2,000 feet above sea level, the air temperature is 35 degrees, the aeroplane handles very, very differently, and you have to think about how you're performing and how you're going to display the aircraft because of the nature of the performance of it's a training aircraft after all. Likewise, if we displayed in the Swiss Alps, for example, you have to think about exactly how the aeroplane is going to perform when you're at 5,000-6,000 feet above sea level, because that obviously is the area in which we're not normally used to in the UK. So we have to think very carefully about how the aeroplane will perform. Not just that, we think about the airspace, we think about the local population, we think about how the rules of just the air traffic controllers work in those different countries. So there's a lot to go behind the scenes putting on our performance in other countries.
Getting to the air show can be quite a challenge for my pilot because our aircraft is quite slow, so it does take a while to get to the show. And for me, for the wing walking, it can sting a little bit when it rains. But when you get to do it in the sunshine, that makes up for it all.
The airplanes are very old-fashioned, so they kind of, part of their design is old-fashioned as well. So there's lots of things that you wouldn't sort of find on a modern aeroplane that you need to sort of take care of. You have to treat the airplane with a lot more respect. You have to be careful when you're getting in, when you're getting out, because it's covered in fabric and not metal. You have to be careful in weather. When you leave the airplanes overnight, you make sure they're tied down, they're chocked properly, and that's before you even go flying. And then in flying terms, when you're flying along, you're affected by situations like turbulence, wind, things like that a lot more than you would be in a more modern airplane.
For me as a pilot, it's a good airshow is an airshow with a display area. It's not like crowded with houses, so the only limitations are the one that are in our national regulations or the airshow standards kind of, so it won't be a lot of limitation with the minimum altitudes that I have to climb up to inside the display area, or limitation of using the afterburner or reheater. Those things I don't want to have as a display pilot, because it makes my routine harder.
Safety first, always safety first. Flying low-level aerobatics in an airshow environment can be dangerous, and so it's important to identify the risk, mitigate the risk, take every step you can to make sure that the show is as safe as possible. And then marketing, I mean, getting the word out about the show, having a good event, letting the community know that the event is there, and making sure that when you go to the trouble of putting together a great show, there is a large group of people who come out to see that event. Money is always an issue. The air shows are more and more expensive to put on, and so there has to be a good revenue base to pay for all that. So most shows now have elements of sponsorship, concession sales, admission tickets, parking, that sort of thing, and together they create the kind of revenue base that a show needs to pay for insurance, performers, fuel, hotels. An air show can be a very expensive endeavor, and so lining up that revenue to pay for those expenses is very important.
Because I never had a sponsor. I had a sponsor sometimes for local, for one particular flight, like when I crossed the channel. That was good, but I'm not, I don't have a contract. I'm not connected to a sponsor. So if anyone wants to come along.
Enorm belangrijk partnerschap voor ons als Koninklijke Luchtmacht Historische Vlucht is onze relatie met de Koninklijke Luchtmacht in Nederland. Wij zijn niet alleen te gast op het vliegbasis Schilserijen. Wij krijgen ook heel veel opdrachten van de luchtmacht, zoals herdenkingsvluchten. En door middel van die relatie met de luchtmacht kunnen wij ons goed in stand houden. Je kunt je voorstellen dat als we op een vliegbasis geld zouden moeten betalen voor stalling en dergelijke, dan wordt de operatie heel erg duur. Daarnaast hebben we een fantastische relatie met de Battle of Britain Memorial Flight. Wij delen kennis, we delen ook vlieguren met elkaar, zodat onze vliegers op de Spitfire daar een stuk grondtraining en vliegervaring krijgen op de Chipmunk. En de vliegers van de Battle of Britain Memorial Flight komen bij ons Harvard vliegen. En die samenwerking is uitstekend en daar zijn we ook heel erg blij en dankbaar voor.
Flying warbirds, like flying any other kind of airplane, is expensive. People say, how much does it cost? It costs you everything that you have. So sponsorship does help. No one event is going to pay all of the costs for operating an airplane, but as I said, it does help and it gives you a purpose.
So sponsorship can be a significant variable. The admissions tickets, you're going if you charge $20, €20, and you get 10,000 people, that's going to be a pretty fixed amount. But what sponsorship can be is that extra bit of revenue that can really put your show over in terms of either making money or investing that money back into the show to make the show even better. A lot of shows also are very deliberate about creating a cash reserve. We are weather dependent, and last thing that any show wants is to get themselves in a position where they're absolutely dependent on good weather, because Mother Nature has a way of interfering with those kind of plans.
I think an air show really stands out if the air show organisation, looks after the aircrew as well as the public.
We're very fortunate with the way the organisers handle the Red Arrows. We're quite a high-profile team, so when we do attend a show, there's a lot of buzz and vibe around the team. So it's not just about the 25 minutes of display flying. There's a lot of build-up to having the Red Arrows. There's a lot of afterthought for the Red Arrows. So we're very lucky in that we can actually continue our presence, if you like, while we're on the ground and also while we're doing our display. So we're very fortunate that organisers recognise that, and they put everything in place they can do to make sure that our time at an air show is as valuable as it can be.
Yeah, a good air show is an organisation that is well organised, and that everything with the paperwork and everything with the rules and regulations, they are cleared and clarified, so it's easy for me as a pilot to understand, and that I don't have to put a lot of effort just by reading hundreds of thousands of pages. So well organized and good documentation is key for success for me as a pilot.
A good air show for me is an air show where we have plenty of time. We turn up before the air show event. We get to meet the organisation. We get to see the site, the location, which you'd call do a bit of a recce. We can talk through our sequence, our display. We can just plan it. If there's any kind of particular obstacle that might be difficult at the site, then you can adapt your display so that it fits more effectively, and ultimately to give the crowd obviously the best display that we can as well. But considerations like how close the hotel is to the airport, that's very important to us, because it's not unheard of to you find yourself staying in a hotel that's more than an hour away by car, and after you've been flying all day and before you fly again for a display, the last thing you want to do is sit in a coach for an hour and a half, because you're already tired by the time you arrive somewhere.
What's very important to know as early in advance is, one, are you going to be accepted to go to the air show? And two, then to know what the general provisions around the air show are, the size, the dimensions, what the other acts are, and to know fairly early on, if possible, where you're going to appear in the schedule, and to make sure then that all the facilities are available to you at the air show to operate the aircraft safely and effectively.
The reaction that you have with people in China or in the United States or in Europe are the same. When they see final split with the flares, they wow! And this enjoyment is very common to all the cultures.
I think the thing that's constant throughout is the public enjoyment. So it doesn't matter which country you go to, the reason we're all doing it is to entertain the public and to do it safely.
I wouldn't say the air shows in the US or Asia are different. Obviously the end goal is the same. An aircraft is performing for the public, so they are enjoying the aircraft's performance. There are different rules in the States, in the US, about how close aeroplanes can come to the crowd, where they can overfly the crowd, where they can't in Europe, and likewise in China there were different rules as to how a team can perform. But generally, a flying display is a flying display. It's putting on a safe performance, showing the public what an aircraft can do.
My sense from having been to a few shows in Europe is that there's greater military support for the European shows than there is in the United States. Being able to draw on a number of local countries and the militaries of those countries is fundamentally different than what we have in the United States and Canada, where it's just the two countries and just the limited amount of military that they have. That in turn creates some pretty significant differences in the civilian performers. We have a much larger, I think, group of civilian performers because they have to fill in those spaces between military and civilian performers, the lack of military performers. I also think there's a fair amount of innovation on how shows are put together, some of the hospitality, the airports and the communities in which Europeans shows are held. That strikes me as a bit different than what we have in the United States.
De uitdaging voor de toekomst is een hele belangrijke factor. Het blijft geld. Het vliegen met historische vliegtuigen kost ontzettend veel geld. Daarnaast, de vliegtuigen worden er niet jonger op, dus het wordt een uitdaging om ze zo lang mogelijk in de lucht te houden.
I think the main challenge going forward now is getting that balance right between safety and access, so that people can actually see the aeroplanes, but in a safe environment. They want to have airplanes flying within a reasonable distance so that they can see them sort of up close and personal, if you like. So this is one of the biggest challenges, to get everything together in a way that is good for the public, good for the airshow organisers and good for the pilot.
Gelukkig blijven onderdelen normaal gesproken wel verkrijgbaar. Ook die worden weer kostbaarder. Wat ook heel kostbaar is de knowledge, de know-how die we hebben als onderhoudsbedrijf. En de generatie die nu de vliegtuigen onderhoudt, die wordt ook wat ouder. En we zoeken daarvoor natuurlijk ook weer opvolging op de manier van jonge krachten binnenhalen. Die de ervaring die de oude mannen hebben kunnen overbrengen op de nieuwe jonge mannen en vrouwen die we ook in onze stichting hebben. Zodat het onderhoud ook in de toekomst gewaarborgd is.
I think the future looks good for the technical part of the aircraft, because today we get it's simpler, easier to produce parts and keep them flying, but today you have more problem with the paperwork and the government, and countries can never agree about a common regulation system, and they just create problems all the time. So I think I think it's the politicians that creates the problems in the future, not the pilots, not the technical issues. It's more the legal paperwork and the lawyers.
For a pilot, we need standardization. We really must play the same game every weekend, everywhere we go, because we build up safety and quality on the standardization. We must not have different rules.
We are very much bound by the NATO rules on air displays. So while we fly certain rules in the UK, we carry those rules, which we're bound by the NATO rules across Europe. So wherever we display, we're always bound by the regulation. And that actually carries across the world. So when we display in China, we display in the Middle East, everything is bound by regulations.
The thing you do notice as well, having experienced 17 different systems, is that it would be a great advantage if one day the rules were the same. If you had the same heights, the same, crowd separation distances, same procedures, qualification, all that sort of stuff, I think that would only make the whole experience even better.
It is critically important, both in the United States and Europe, but it's critically important that the shows, the performers that put on shows, the regulators who get involved in monitoring events, get together at events like the European Airshow Council to exchange ideas, get to know one another, work through problems, debrief from the past years, and EAC is a great venue for that. We've just spent a couple days here in Malta learning from one another and tackling the challenges of the upcoming airshow season.